Jesse, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Laurence.
Another interesting week, Jesse, and some good questions coming in again.
Mm-hmm.
One question or one area that worries me a little bit, having done some research like you, Jesse, is I hear my friend Tracy or my friend Sarah has not got any menopause symptoms and she's now through it. You know, she's 55 or 56 and she's through it. And that got me doing some research and doing some searches online to stumble across World Alzheimer's Day. And then I looked at the statistics and I saw two-thirds of all Alzheimer patients are women. And I saw 57% of people in the UK with dementia are women. And this just got me thinking, Jesse, and I know we're not medically qualified, but I think it's just an interesting subject. The first question that I've got to you is, as a woman, if you're lucky enough not to get symptoms of menopause, please don't think that your body's still not following a natural progression. You're still missing the estrogens and et cetera, that are on top of it. What's your feelings and thoughts around that?
I think what's actually interesting is some of the women who have commented about that to me actually are doing it through a sense of guilt. It's a sense of guilt, and it's actually a little bit of a sense of worry, right? There's a sense of guilt of, sort of almost survivor's guilt in a way. Like, why didn't this happen to me? Why is this happening to my friends? Why is it so devastating for her, but it didn't happen to me? And, one of the things that I've heard, a number of women say in the comments, or even experts say, who I follow online, they say, celebrate it. Celebrate it. Good for you. You're fortunate. You should be grateful. Don't worry about it. You're still going through, your body is still losing all of those eggs that you were born with in your ovaries. Your body is still losing the hormones that supported those eggs. It's just that for whatever reason, I can't sit here and define it, but for whatever reason, that loss of estrogen, that loss of progesterone and testosterone didn't affect you the way it affects other people. And we see that in a lot of things. There's a lot of people who go through things differently than others, even if the circumstances are the same. And I think this is something to celebrate.
Yeah, and just because you haven't suffered with it yet doesn't mean your body's not still struggling in the future. You might still have another 30 or 40 years ahead of you. Your bone density is still reducing. As you say, your egg cells are diminishing. Your body's still going through change. I think that's really vitally important. I think that's a
And that
vitally
bone density
important
loss, that bone density loss is no joke. That's osteoporosis, that's fractures. There's 20% bone density loss in women in postmenopause, and there's osteoporosis, I think, is affecting more women than men. The fractures related to osteoporosis are a big deal, hip especially. I think the statistics I just looked up was I think it was 1 in 3 adults over the age of 65 will die within a year from a broken hip.
I know, that is scary.
Yeah, that increases with that bone density loss. So, I mean, just another thing to, if you think you've reached postmenopause because now you're, 366 days from your last period, it doesn't necessarily mean it's all over.
Correct. And also the other thing that worries me, Jesse, and I'm just speaking out loud, and I hope the ladies listening to us don't slate me too much, but this thing about I'm through it. It's behind me. A message that I put out to the ladies there is, it's not behind you. You've just learned to live with it. You've still gone through changes. Your body's still going through changes. Honestly, you're not whoever you are out there, you are not a superhuman. As a woman, your body has a natural journey to follow from birth to death, and your body is going to follow it in its own way. And you're going to have ups and downs during that journey. But what happens to one woman is going to happen to another woman. You are following the exact same journey.
Yeah, exactly. And I think women could make the mistake if they're not feeling any of these symptoms. You know how women talk a lot about how they don't necessarily know what's going on. The doctors they're seeing aren't trained on this. They were not prepared for this. And we know all these things are true. But what happens if a woman then just seems to think, I don't need to learn anything about this. I don't need to try to understand this. I don't maybe need to pay as much attention to this as other women are, or I don't need to talk to my doctor about it as much as maybe I could be. And then all of a sudden something hits. I think that's the tough part. You can't define certain things are going to happen starting, at, let's say, 35 to a certain time. And then, from the average age of 51 when menopause hits, well, after that, as soon as you're 51.1, you're done. Some women are never going to know when they're going to start to feel some of the effects of this.
And you said something really important there, Jesse. And just because you're a woman who is lucky enough, and you should be celebrating not going through it to the depths that some of the other women are, be careful what message you send to your daughters or to your nieces. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing guaranteeing that your daughter, your niece, will have an easy passage with her hormonal health journey.
There's no doubt. I mean, I was just thinking about this morning. I was thinking about, we talk about how husbands need to show up for their wives, to support their wives and what they're going through. And that it's about the wife, it's about the marriage. I mean, these are the reasons to show up for her, and those are true. But the other reason to show up is for the kids, right? I mean, the kids are seeing how their dad is showing up for their mom, and the kids know, I'm willing to bet that kids are more aware of what their mom is going through in menopause than their dad is, because they're seeing that direct effect. They're seeing how she's maybe changed and how she cares for them, or how she's even able to show up for them. If she's got, terrible insomnia or depression or anxiety from menopause, they are going to notice it before he does. And if they see that he's not doing anything about it, that he's, seems to not care, or isn't talking to her about it, or isn't even able to let them know that he knows and talk to them about it, talk to the kids. If they see all that happening, what are they going to learn from that? And how does that set us up to be in a better place in the next generation, which I think is part of the focus, right? It's like, how do we salvage this generation as best we can, knowing the challenges women are going through, but how do we just make sure the next generation of women, the girls today, just have a completely different experience?
And I have to agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we have to look at some of the younger generations coming through and make sure that from early ages, we're educating our sons and our daughters without them realizing they're being educated. I think that's vitally important. The other question that's come through, Jesse, which I know you'll have some good thought process around, is I had a message directly from a lady that came through and sent me it was a simple one-liner. And it was, why won't he listen to me?
Yeah, I got 1,000 of those. I got 1,000 of those. Yeah.
And how would you reply to that?
To be honest, my goal, my personal journey here is to try to not get disheartened by that constant, cry for help, right? Because that's what we're here to try to fix. But it's hard. It is literally hard to continue to hear that lack of support. And the good news is I do hear the opposite side too. I do hear women say that their husbands are showing up, or even better, that their husbands have learned to show up because of things that we're talking about. But for the women who will write, just like you said, a one-liner, he'll never listen, he's not listening, he doesn't hear me, he doesn't care. I say, I'm sorry. I say, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I say, I can't imagine how hard that must be, or how lonely that must feel. I tell them that they're not alone. I tell them that sadly, this is the story for so many other women. And I certainly don't say this, and this isn't my place to say, but other women in the comments will literally say, and go. If you are with a man that doesn't care about the next third of your life, go. And I think that that's what's leading to the, over 60% divorce rates that are happening between the ages of 40 and 60 for women. And the fact that 73% of women, which is a UK study, by the way, 73% of women are attributing menopause to the cause of their divorce. And I think this is why.
I also think, Jesse, it's a very valid point, but I also think it's the way, and please, the majority of women, I'm sure, are communicating it quite well. But I think there's also a lot of women out there who aren't communicating it well. If I'm a man and my wife or my partner is not telling me what's wrong, is not speaking to me and sharing those conversations, then in some way, shape or form, how am I supposed to understand what she's going through?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Well,
tricky old subject.
it is. It is. I think the thing that I've been trying to understand about why that might be is, and I've asked some of our guests this. I think it has to do with the shame that women carry as they go through menopause or as they enter menopause or as they get familiar with this new evolution of their life. And I didn't actually totally understand it until one of our guests explained it, which was there's a combination of things. There's the societal expectations of, beauty, the societal expectations of how am I supposed to look or how am I supposed to act as a woman. That is weighing heavy on women. It's hard for them to talk about the fact that they feel like they're not able to show up and meet some of those. Not that they should be, but there is that weight that they feel, and now it's even harder. It was hard before, now it's even harder. And then the other aspect of it is, I think, a sense of grief that they carry, knowing that they've lost who they once were. They don't largely even understand why they're losing it. That's the problem too, right? And when what we're talking about, women can't show up necessarily and talk to their husbands confidently about what they're going through, because where did they get that information? Right there, the confusion is within women as well, which was something that surprised me when I started learning about this, and it makes sense. Their moms didn't talk to them about it. Their friends aren't talking about it. The amount of articles available, it just in relation to articles around men's health versus women's health, is not even close. It's a joke. Doctors were not trained to support them. So what are they sharing? They're getting gaslit by doctors. If I share something medically about what I'm going through with my wife, it's probably going to be from a doctor's visit. And I come home and I say, here's what the doctor said. But when a woman comes home from one of 6 different doctors that she's been going to who are gaslighting her, telling her that she's just getting old or she needs to relax or she needs to have a glass of wine, they're not talking to her about hormones. They're not actually explaining to her why she's going through what she's going through in menopause. What are they supposed to say to their husbands when they walk in the door that evening? Honey, I'm just getting old.
It's a
Like,
very
that's not.
valid point. Yeah, it's a very valid point. And I think the majority of women out there will admit that they knew nothing about menopause until they became menopausal.
For
And
sure.
they learn on a daily basis. They're learning as their bodies are changing. So I do think you've hit the nail on the head there, Jesse. We can't expect the younger women, just like the younger men, to understand menopause because they just haven't got there yet. I mean, my own daughter, she called my wife the other day and said, "When you went through X, did you experience Y?" And it's only at that point that my wife and daughter had a conversation about what my wife went through at a certain part of her life. And, that was all medical orientated, but my daughter had never had a reason to ask that question,
Sure.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's the preparation that needs to be taking place is in that language, right? It's from mom saying, you may go through something like this. You may experience these things, or let me talk to you about what I experienced. All right. Like, even better would be personal account. Here's what this was like for me. It doesn't mean it will be like this for you, but I want you to understand that this is something that I went through, and it was hard. And here's what I experienced. And that would just be enough to get, a daughter to look into it further. Right. But I think the sons are going to play a much bigger role in this than people think. I think men not understanding what menopause is as big or bigger of a problem than anything else that's going on. I think that it's in the statistics, it's in the numbers, it's in the divorce rates, it's in just the logical just reality that everybody knows that men don't understand anything about menopause. Like, I don't think anybody's going to really argue that. So that's not helping. And it's sure as hell not helping the younger generation. It's not creating a new generation of sons today that will become husbands and fathers tomorrow it's not creating a generation of those men who will understand what their wives or even their friends are going through. Or, we talk about it in the workplace, or their employees or their team members. All of it has to do with not just educating women and giving them the support that they need and getting doctors to be educated to provide that, but it's also men. It's men understanding this. I think that we get that, but I don't know that most people get that. I don't think that there's enough focus on that need, and I think that that's what's going to pay off in the next generation.
Yeah, again, I think you're spot on there, Jesse. I think what we learn at home, especially as employers, we can take into the workplace. I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe it's what you learn in the workplace you take into the home. I think
Mm-hmm.
so. So I think the more we can educate men from a family perspective, from being at home with their wives and their partners, and we get them to understand how it impacts them, how it changes their life, that knowledge, not to fix her, but to understand her and to believe her, and then to apply that to their workforce, to their colleagues, to their team members. I think that's the way we really um, vastly speed up this entire process of understanding.
And what are you seeing in the UK as it pertains to the workplace and menopause? I mean, changes, are things going in the right direction?
Jesse, there are changes without a shadow of a doubt, but there's still a lot of lip service being played. We've gone through you've got to have policies in place, but there's smoke without fire. There's policies without action, and just having a policy in place is not teaching or portraying the correct message to your workforce. We're seeing some changes in law at the moment around workplace law, which is going to force people to come out with action plans, and they're going to have to actually do something, which is fantastic. But you will still get those companies that do more than they have to do, and you'll get those companies that will do less than they have to do. So I suppose there will always be smoke without fire.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I guess a little bit more awareness is some place to start. And, I think that I think a lot of the talk about menopause and a lot of the thinking about menopause and what women are going through, I think not intentionally, but most people think about that as like, how is she showing up in the home? Right? It's like in or in bed, hot flashes, anxiety, right? Insomnia, those types of things, nocturia, getting up in the middle of the night and going to the bathroom a bunch of times, or the itchy ear canals, all that kind of stuff. It often is talked about at night or it's talked about in the house. I don't think people actually are really connecting the dots, or men, obviously, women certainly are, but I don't think men are totally connecting the dots that those issues and the effects of those issues, and then a whole host of other issues, they stay with her when she gets in the car and leaves. They stay with her. Those hot flashes do not just happen at night. They may be more frequent at night, but they also happen in a public setting. They happen in a public presentation. They happen when she's in a job interview. They happen when she's talking, to her boss, or if she's in an important moment. They can be embarrassing at a minimum, but they can cause anxiety. They can cause panic attacks, and they can cause those types of things, heart palpitations, to happen not in the sort of relative security of your bed or your home, but they can happen out there. And I think that this is why workplace education is so important, because I can't remember the calculation, but don't we spend like most of our lives at work or something like that? Ridiculous.
Correct.
And so why wouldn't that be a bigger priority? Why wouldn't that be something that we're talking more about? She is all of these symptoms, the insomnia, the brain fog, the memory loss, all of them, they are happening there too. And think about the effect that must be having on everything from productivity to how she interacts with team members, or how they interact with her, or all of that stuff, right? And I think that's what's scary. There's a whole side of this that is completely ignored.
And it starts even earlier than menopause. I mean, when you go to periods and go to those 28 days, that cycle of a period, and you start looking at when she should be in the office doing admin because she's irritable, when she's argumentative, and then those days where she should be speaking to people because she's an absolute powerhouse. And I think when companies start realizing that by working with the women in their teams and finding out when they're feeling good and when they're feeling strong versus when they're feeling weak, that's not really strengths and weaknesses. It's opportunities. If you were a sports team, you would be asking your players, are you better going on in the second half? Are you better going on in the first half? Are you better starting? Are you better coming off the bench? These are the things that we've got to realize, especially as employers. These can be huge performance orientations. Women at the moment within the workplace are vastly accelerating. They're becoming forces, unbelievable forces within the workplace. They're top of their game. And I think when us men realize there's a whole hormonal journey going on within them outside of menopause, I think that's when we really start to learn how to get the most out of our employees.
And it's hard because statistically, more men are in leadership positions or running companies than women are in those decision-making positions. And as much as women are catching up and they're becoming a bigger, they're playing bigger roles in those areas, they don't have the majority. So, if you have a female CEO or a female, head of HR or something like that, who can make a decision or influence a decision about education around menopause in the workplace, and that's great, but that's not the norm. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it's not being prioritized, and I think that that's something that companies are missing, because you could look at it from a welfare standpoint and you could say you should care about this because of just the health and the welfare of your employees. But if that doesn't, trigger it for you, Mr. Company Executive, well, then you should care about it because of the number of women who are either quitting or considering quitting their jobs, and the impact that's going to have on your business because of what they're going through in menopause, because that's real too. Those are real costs. Those are real impacts to your business. So I'd like to think that you care enough about women, that you care enough about your team members to want to put this in place for that reason alone. But if it needs to be about money, it can be about money too, because it's going to affect your business. And the more that this continues to go on with women not understanding what's going on, with doctors not being trained to support them, with when they go home, they don't get the support they need because husbands don't know what's going on. And those are your people showing up, supposedly leading your teams, leading your business. It's not hard to figure out how that's going to end.
Correct. And you know what's really sad, Jesse, and I know this month in America is Suicide Prevention Month, and suicide is not something I particularly take enjoyment about talking about, but you can see why it's such a dark place for so many women. Imagine going to work where you feel unwanted, unseen, invisible, not listened to, just as a person, you're down in the dumps. You then go and have to get on a tube, or you have to get on a train, or you have to drive, and you might be having driving anxiety, whatever it might be. And from there you get home and you walk in, and you really coming into your place, a sanctuary, you're coming into your safe place. And for some women, they're not. For some women, they're coming into a battlefield. And now you've got to put it all together. So you've got a battlefield at work, you've got a battlefield in commuting, you've got another battlefield when you get home, and the only peace you get is when you go to bed at night. But that's no longer peaceful because you're struggling with the restless legs and the insomnia and the hot sweats and everything, and your entire life is just a battle. And you can see why so many women now, the suicide rates are increasing, and you can see why, and it's such a sad place.
I read incredible statistics, like 10% of women going through menopause have suicidal thoughts. 20% of women going through menopause have clinically depressive symptoms from what's going on, from losing that estrogen, from losing the amount of serotonin and dopamine in their brains, which is, their feel-good chemicals. I mean, these are hormonal, physiological, reactions that are going on. And I think that part of the lack of safe place that you're talking about, and it's so stark when you explain it in that way, which is, it's almost like there is no escape. She can't escape internally what's happening, but she also can't go anywhere to make it better because of the battlefield that may be at home, or the lack of support that may be at work, or the loneliness in between, right? But the fact that this is a hormonal physiological response that is out of her control, what's happening to her. It's not her choice. She doesn't want to be doing this. And the husbands that don't understand that, or the husbands that think that it's not real, or that it's an excuse, or that she should just act differently. I mean, it's literally, like telling somebody with depression to just stop being sad, or just tell somebody with anxiety, don't worry so much. Like, listen, if they could stop being sad, they would. If they could stop worrying so much, they would. And if women could stop having, unpredictable mood swings, or loss of libido, or weight gain that's out of their control, or not sleeping for weeks, months, or years on end, or hot flashes that are keeping them up at night, they would not do those things if they could choose not to. So stop telling women that they can just fix it, or that they can just act differently, or that they should take accountability for their actions. It's literally like telling anybody else, somebody who's neurodivergent, somebody with ADD, somebody with ADHD, somebody with dyslexia, you should just see those words better. Like, what are you talking about? Sorry, I went on a rant.
No, and it's a good rant. I mean, you're quite right. How do you tell someone with dyslexia, you should read better, or you should see words better, or you should teach yourself to spell? It makes no sense, Jesse. It makes no sense. And what's really lovely about this is you are so passionate about it, and I am as well. And that's why I know we can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. And that's why I love talking about it. I love talking to you about it. I love talking to women about it. I love reading the comments, and just realizing that there's a need. I mean, there is a clear and present need for men to be educated on menopause. I think there was already a known need for women, right? Because they're the ones who are realizing that they don't understand what's going on, or that doctors aren't trained to support them, or that they weren't prepared for this. But what I think people weren't necessarily, getting a grip on is the fact that meanwhile, there's a whole host of men today that also need to understand this. And then there's a next generation of boys today that need to understand this. And I think that's where obviously we are focusing our conversations, we're focusing our efforts, we're focusing this podcast, the guests that we bring on, the TikTok channels that we have. It's all about trying to, even if it has to be one guy at a time, it's trying to move this in a different direction than where it's been.
Yeah, very, very true, Jesse. Very, very true. And, if I want to put out a message here to our listeners, if there's anyone out there who really wants to come onto this podcast, if you really have got something you want to say, or you might be just someone who's got a story to tell about their journey, or you could just be someone who is, really involved in what we're talking about. You might be a professional and understand ADHD and menopause, or whatever it might be. Please don't be shy. Please reach out. Jesse and I are both very, very contactable, and we'll always reply to you. And we'd love to have some of the listeners on as guests.
Awesome. I think it's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. Reach out. We want this to be a story told by the community. We want everybody to come together and work on figuring this out.